кажется, что в Западной Украине и в эмиграции, в диаспоре украинской самая важная цель униатства или греко-католической церкви – это распространять экстремальный, значит, такой вид украинского национализма и потом такую русофобию, что все, что русское, это плохое. Исторически украинские, значит, греко-католики вообще не поддерживали, значит, украинского национализма. Были среди них, значит, еще в 19-м начале и в начале, значит, 20 века русофилы, которые сочувствовали, значит, русской культуре. И до этого они всегда поддерживали, значит, Польшу. И некоторые униаты, особенно, значит, Белоруссии, но тоже и на Украине, считали себя поляками. Управление греко-католической церкви — это управление, это иммигрантское управление. И у них есть только одна цель.
It's the Alex Jones Show, and I'm Jay Dyer.
У них есть только одна цель. Цель, значит, создать украинский патриархат, украинско-католический патриархат и удалиться еще дальше и дальше от, значит, православия и от России. Как раз когда было, значит, умягчение или можно сказать, приближение, значит, католиков, значит, к православию, они как будто это умышленно делают, чтобы это портить постоянно. Хорошие отношения между, значит, православными и католиками.
So what that clip is explaining, if you're listening on radio, it's a little hard to make out, but he's basically a person who's a former Jesuit who had come into Orthodoxy, and he's in the Ukraine talking about the way that Jesuits had helped foster through the Roman Catholic Church in the Ukraine this split between Russian Orthodoxy and a new State Department-controlled Orthodoxy. In other words, this is the cohesion in terms of religion in this region, which is the Orthodox Church. And the way that this was split was actually done very openly by the CIA. In fact, the former CIA director went to the Ukraine, met with the head of this new created State Department church. John McCain himself went over there and met with all of these people. So just as they did with the political sphere of the far right and even the neo-Nazi groups that they supported, and McCain's even been seen on stage with these people, Right Sector, Azov, these different people. They essentially create a new political sphere, a new political movement, and a new religion, a new church, a completely state-created church over there in the Ukraine. And that's just one model. So when you look at that model, that template, that pattern, then you notice and you can see how it's done everywhere else. And that's just a person who's just giving a testimony to the fact that as a former Jesuit, he knows about this, he knows how it's done, and he was in some sense probably involved in that when he was working as a Jesuit. It's not an accident that that John Brennan, for example, is a fellow of Fordham University. Fordham University is a Jesuit school directly connected to the CIA. And then if you notice, the people who are involved in this deep state kind of liberal coup plot, they're all the same people. It's the same crew, right? Why do you think Gateway Pundit covered the fact a few years ago that it was Obama's State Department, right, that had assisted Soros in the overthrow of Ukraine? Why? To obtain oil, gas industry, right? So it has more. But now you can see why it's such a big scandal with Burisma, Biden, and all these characters. If you remember back at the time of the, if I recall, I'm just going from memory many years ago, when there was the Bundy Ranch standoff, that whole land was part of a deal that, if I remember, it was Biden's son that Biden was trying to organize a land deal, right, with China, if I recall. So that was the real reason, I think, behind the Bundy standoff. At least that's what some people claim. And it's not out of the realm of belief or possibility, because if you remember, Hillary Clinton wrote an essay, I think it was in Brookings Institute. She wrote a paper for the Brookings Institute, a little article there, where she said that we've got to take care of Gaddafi on humanitarian grounds. And then she even says something to the effect of, if we do this, we can then kind of aid all of our allies. I forget her exact wording, but the assumption is, when we go and compare with what was in the WikiLeaks, her emails, she talks about the kickbacks. So it's basically a pay-for-play scheme, right? That's why these operations occur in these other countries. It has nothing to do with human rights. That's a cover. It's not about free markets. It's not about any of that stuff. It's about shaking up the existing order to move in and allocate the resources and give kickbacks to the people that, in Hillary's case, if you remember, all of these different foreign donors, right? They basically are putting money in to get, a land deal, to get money, or to get whatever it is. Gaddafi's gold, even, I think, comes up in the emails at one point. Just all this wild stuff that's just completely, like Bond villain level machinations and plans, and you think that it's not real. No, it's very real. And in fact, that's the biggest revelation, I think it was this week, with this document of the DNI that comes out about the CIA being hipped to the fact that Russian intelligence had been hipped to the fact that Hillary cooked up the whole thing. So Hillary had cooked up this whole Russiagate story. It was known, the Russians appeared to have figured it out. The CIA found out that the Russians had figured it out, so they went and told Obama. And so in this letter, the Radcliffe letter that came out, this DNI letter, it actually reads that according to the handwritten notes, former CIA Director Brennan subsequently briefed President Obama and other senior national security officials on the intelligence, including the alleged approval by Hillary Clinton on July 26, 2016, of a proposal from one of her foreign policy advisors to vilify Trump by stirring up a scandal claiming interference by Russian security services. It goes on to say that Hillary Clinton's approval of a plan concerning Trump and Russian hackers hampering in the elections as a means of distracting the public from her use of a private mail server. That's all in that DNI letter that just came out. I highly recommend going and reading that, because what does this letter show? Well, it's pretty much proof of what, again, as I said, the 15, 16 times the Russiagate narrative collapsed. Well, here's yet another final nail in the coffin showing that we know that they were spying on the Trump campaign to cook up the scandal. Hillary was already implicated with deals in terms of Russia. We know this from the Uranium One New York Times story that came out. So, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, if you were the Russians, like, who would you really try to co-opt? Would you really go for Trump? I mean, doesn't it make more sense to go with Hillary? She's already got deals in Russia, right? I mean, she's already kind of implicated in a lot of this stuff already. Trump's sounding this, a beacon call of America first. Doesn't really make sense to try to co-opt Trump. If anybody was going to be trying to co-opt it, it would seem to be somebody like Hillary. If you remember back to the Anna Chapman spy stuff, if I recall, again, going from memory here, Anna Chapman was already, I think, in Hillary circles, right? So that operation didn't work, that failed. But I think at that time she was trying to get close to Obama and Obama's donors and people like that. But ironically, she was already in the circles of Hillary. So there's a lot more connection between, say, so-called Russians and agents and Hillary than anything that you might try to come up with or cook up or try to tie to Trump. And amazingly, none of it stuck, right? All of these attempts to bribe people, all of these attempts to try to get people to come out and lie and make up, none of it worked. It all failed. It all collapsed. There was not anything that could tie Trump to Russian intelligence or any of this stuff. And so the whole thing is now known to be a hoax and admittedly now a distraction from the emails. And now we see why Trump, in fact, in the debates, my speculation, my guess is that this is what Trump was mentioning in the debates. Do you remember at that point in the debate where he says, "We have you on tape. No, I've got you, got Obama, you're all on tape," right? And that's, you could tell Biden was getting pretty shook by that. But this is the model, you see. So the regime change is really just part of the foreign entanglement coup, transfer of power, so that then the new Western CIA puppet state can just allocate and suck off of the existing power, the people and the resources, send all that back to the big Fortune 100 that's coming in now to offer vaccinations and abortions and whatever else the Fortune 100 wants when they move, Hillary and company into these different countries. That's really what's going on here. Is it's a model of, you could call it American imperialism, but remember, that was never the American idea, right? The American idea was always non-interventionism And as we know from the Rockefeller's biography, from David's memoirs, from the CFR archives, they talked about how they wanted to transition America out of a non-interventionist, non-foreign entanglement mindset and turn it into an engine, right, of what the Empire of Britain used to be, right? Pax Britannia, Commonwealth of God. Now let's make it the American Empire so that we can try to set up ultimately, right, this technocracy. And they're using America as a cloak